Hi, Driven Next Gen. Happy Wednesday. I hope you had an incredible, over the top, incredible, amazing day. You guys, 9 days left in June. If we don't count today, 8 days left in the month of June. What are you so passionate and excited about that it has overtaken your life? And you guys, in 8 days, our goal is to wrap up our Diamond Circle area. And I can tell you, as a leader in our Driven National area, we need you. It's like all hands on deck here. So I'm going to start today by recognizing our queens from last week. Yay! And today I'm going to talk, I'm going to call this storytelling time with your national sales director, because I've got some pretty awesome stories that I want to share with you. All right, so our queen of appointments, most appointments booked for this coming up week is Kelly Gilliland. She has 4 coming up for this week, so congratulations. And our queen of most skincare sets sold, so it's really honorable mention, but this goes to Elsa Abdel Rahim, who is our reigning queen of sales this year for the Driven National area, with 6 skincare sets sold this past week. And our queen of sales this week, Esther Sanchez, $776 in sales. Congratulations. And with most new team members, our queen of sharing goes to Yvette Landastoy. She added 1 new team member this week. Congratulations, Yvette. We're so excited for you. This past August, it'll be a year in August that I went to the Global Leadership Summit. I've talked about Global Leadership Summit like over and over and over. And really I got to hear an interview with TD Jakes that rocked my world. And I did a call on Destiny, and I absolutely loved it. And probably one of the best gifts my sales directors have ever given me is a subscription to Success Magazine, and he's on the cover. And I couldn't put it down. As busy as I am, I was like, I just needed to hear from TD Jakes. He fills my soul. He fills my spirit. I think that's because he is filled with the spirit. And so I'm going to call this story time with your national sales director, and I'm going to read to you. TD Jakes says he wants you to suffer, and that is the name of this article. But really, I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship, because it's very hard to just find what entrepreneurship is. And I think the majority of the questions I was asked to share about, which I answered last week, have to do with entrepreneurship. And he is gifted in communication, and he did a phenomenal job of explaining what entrepreneurship is. And as you hear his story, you'll find where entrepreneurship is born from. So it says, TD Jakes wants you to suffer. And it says, I can still see his cracked, parched lips, fever blisters, and all of that. Bishop TD Jakes is silent for a moment, struck by the memory. It hurts me a lot. I even got to a point of wanting to die. Painful. But if you took that away from me, I wouldn't be sitting here today. When Thomas Dexter Jakes was 10 years old, his father got sick with kidney disease, and he was the youngest of 3 kids living in South Charleston, West Virginia. And until that point, Jake's life had looked much like the lives of other kids in his neighborhood. His mother was a home economics teacher, and his father owned a janitorial business. He went to school, and he sold vegetables from his mother's garden for extra money. But when Jake's father got sick, the world tilted on its axis, and childhood all but disappeared. The family traveled back and forth to Ohio, a 5-hour round trek, so his father could receive treatment twice a week, while his mother struggled to hold down a job. I had to be self-sustaining, Jake says. As a child, Jakes learned to take care of himself. He was the one who got himself up in the morning, went to school, cooked, and watched over the house. He even had to help his father with some of his business affairs. So I wasn't like a normal kid. I really never had a childhood. I related to this because I myself never really had a childhood. I had to grow up real early. Over the next 6 years, Jakes learned to help as much as he could. He cleaned up after his father, shaved him, and even ran his dialysis machine. Watching his father suffer and weaken had a life-altering impact on the boy, who would grow up into one of the world's most impactful faith leaders as a man. One of the common threads Jakes weaves through his sermon is the idea that, as he says, the blessing is in the heartbreak. Write that down. The blessing is in the breaking. The blessing is in the breaking. He believes that the trials of life, the struggle, the trauma, the disappointment, the pain become the tools we need to build greatness. He believes the most successful people are often the ones who have been the most broken. When Jakes was 16, his father died of renal failure. Had he not gotten sick, I might not be responsible, he says. I might be sitting under a bridge smoking a joint had my father lived. I might not have been me. Today, Jakes is the bishop of the Potter's House, a 30,000 plus member church headquartered in Dallas and another large congregation in Denver. Sitting at a shiny conference table in his office, a plush and colorful room with no windows, he tells me that when they designed the new church, they gave everything else a place in the building before they picked the remaining spot for his office. With no outside view of the leftover room, he did his best to brighten it up by raising the ceiling, bringing in his favorite artwork, and creating a space that's welcoming while uniquely his own. It's a symbol of his approach to just about everything. Serve first, then you make space for yourself. In the heart of the building, the office feels like a home away from home, although the barber's chair off the main room is a reminder of his constantly in-demand public persona. So he has to have a barber chair there all the time so that they do his makeup for all his videos and his talk show and everything that he's involved in. If you don't know anything about him, not only is he a preacher, he's an author, he is a producer, he has a talk show, and he's been named America's Best Preacher by I think it was Time magazine. So there's a little recap on him, okay? His real oasis is the home he shares with his wife, Sarita, where his 5 grown children and their families visit. His success extends far beyond his ministry and into film, music, books, and other entrepreneurial ventures that afforded him the income to live in a house he says his father would have bragged about claiming. Jake started TDJ Enterprises in 1995 and has written more than 40 books, several New York Times bestsellers. His next book, Soar, Taking Your Entrepreneurial Passion to the Next Level, is out in October. He has produced films as well as written and produced musicals. Also, he does musicals, films, and plays. Through his record label, Dexterity Sounds, he has released nearly 20 records. His projects have earned him Grammys, a Quill Award, multiple NAACP Image Awards, Dove Award nominations, and Independent Film Festival Awards. He has been honored by an Essence magazine as All-Star Gospel Tribute and is in the International Gospel Music Hall of Fame and Museum. Jakes has received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Leadership Award by the Congress of Racial Equality and the NAACP President's Award, given to an individual or group to recognize special achievements in furthering the cause of civil rights and public service. For his leadership and educational reach, he's received the BET Honors Award, and he's received 13 honorary degrees and doctorates. He's been named by Time magazine as America's Best Preacher. In an age when scandal leads the news and preachers aren't exempt, that kind of recognition is a public stamp of approval on what his parishioners and loved ones already know. TD Jakes is the real deal. Despite his high-profile success, Jakes has an often surprising approach to what are usually taboo topics such as sex, drugs, and abuse. He originally gained public recognition with his first book, Woman, Thou Art Lucid, Healing the Wounds of the Past, addressing trauma in women's lives. Today, his willingness to speak about the most difficult aspects of life to people at their lowest points continues to inspire loyalty among followers. His conferences and events draw hundreds of thousands of people in need of help and hope all over the world. But it all started because he himself needed help and he needed hope. As a child, he loved music. He says his mother and grandmother were always singing, and music was part of everyday life, and so was faith. I almost cannot remember ever not having faith. It was like a give it in our home. He says his family wasn't about religion, as they were about having a relationship with God. He says his fondest memories of his mother's mom, a sharecropper from Alabama who had 15 children, is her sitting in her rocking chair in Alabama with her quilt over her legs and her Bible in her lap. And it was how our culture survived the atrocities of our history. We couldn't afford not to have faith. We didn't have anything else. By the time Jakes was in high school, he turned regularly to his faith to deal with the emotional turmoil at home around his father's illness. I used to sneak my Bible over the top of my science book and read it because I was just enamored by it. It's weird, uncanny, unnatural way that was a clue for where I was going. His fascination for reading the Bible so often earned him the nickname at school, Bible Boy. Jake says he wasn't a goody two-shoes, but he always was enthralled by scripture, history, theology, and the way the world turns somehow. The really emerging power, life-changing, intimate moment that kept me on the course to destiny, that went beyond, happened after my father died. I think it happened out of the groping and clutching of an adolescent boy trying to find my daddy. And all that was left of him was embodied in the saying, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." I was looking for daddy, and that never goes away. Rather than opening for corruption or decline as it might have been, Jake's teenage loss was a driving force in his life for good. See, everybody has a choice to make, whether they're going to go this way or that way. I think that the throttle of what drove me into ministry, what started the passion for me, was trying to find healing for my own wounds. And then growing up in the tumultuous environment that I grew up in, being suspended between life and death, made me take life much more seriously than most teenagers. I think that the thirst created a cavern inside of me through which an artesian well erupted, from which I continue to talk to my generation to this day. All of this sounds heady and serious, but as soon as Jakes recalls his first sermon, he burst out laughing. At 19, he delivered a sermon on Ezekiel 37 to a church about the size of the office we're sitting in. I can't remember much of what I said because I was blinded with terror. Blinded. I mean, absolutely blinded, he says. They were not impressed, and nor was I. He was so terrified that in the first few years of preaching, he couldn't hold a microphone because of the trembling. He used a mic stand and held his hands behind his back until he could calm down enough to move around. But he was determined, and he says, not to let the fear paralyze the purpose. Not to let the fear paralyze the purpose. I think that's a good thing, not to be too impressed with yourself, because I never approached ministry from the perspective of, oh, I'm good at this. So I threw everything at it because I didn't think I was very good. I still preach hard today, but not so much because of insecurity, but because it's about a level of excellence for me and being fully engaged in whatever you do. And guys, I could so relate to that. I never thought I was good. And then when you realize, wow, you do have success, you throw everything into it because it's a level of excellence. Like, I can't imagine working Mary Kay without total, absolute excellence because it's what it deserves. Jakes wouldn't become a full-time preacher for nearly 10 years. In fact, he went to the same church for 7 years and was asked to preach only 2 or 3 times. He enrolled in West Virginia State University but dropped out and went to work full-time at Union Carbide, a subsidiary of Dow Chemical. He began to travel and preach at other churches, becoming an itinerant, I can never say that word right. Here we go. Itinerant minister when he wasn't working a shift at the factory. To a degree, I've always been bivocational. I don't know that I ever fully became one-dimensional, even to this day. At 24, he married Sarita. Later the same year, he became pastor at the Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith in Montgomery, West Virginia. The church had 10 members, but under Jake's nascent leadership, it slowly grew. Then he lost his job, and they didn't know it then, but he and his family were headed for really dark times. Jake's mom was financially creative. She sold Avon, she peddled her homegrown produce, and saved her money to buy properties and to collect rents. Listen to her. She was hustling. It was the way we survived. My father started a business with a mop and a bucket and ended up with 42 employees. Jakes remembers watching his father fill out payroll or pick out business cards and hopping into his dad's red truck to go negotiate contracts to scrub floors in grocery stores. I never once heard the word entrepreneurship, but that's all I ever knew, he says. Entrepreneurship is not an opportunity. It's a mentality. Write that down in capital letters. It is not an opportunity. It's a mentality. It's a mentality that does not accept the limitations of a salary. It says you don't get to determine how much I make. You can determine how much you're going to pay me, but you can't determine how much I'm going to make, because how much I'm going to make is only determined by the tenacity of my own creativity. Jake says his understanding of entrepreneurship didn't become real until he lost his job at Union Carbide. At the time, the church was paying him $300 a month with a $10 meal allowance. This wasn't enough money to feed a house, his wife, and his 2 kids. His utilities were turned off, and they repossessed my car. I was scared to death. We lost absolutely everything. To furnish the house, he picked up an old discarded couch with 3 legs. He put a brick under one and covered it with a sheet. He found work digging ditches for his brother, who took odd jobs installing gas lines. I'd get $100 and I'd run to the grocery and I'd try to feed my kids. My sister, who worked for Allied Chemical, would come every second Friday and bring groceries to the house and split them with me. He pauses and his eyes fill with tears. I can't go there. I can't talk about that too much. He blinks and he looks the other way, wondering if we would ever get up. Sleepless, distraught, my daughter was born on WIC. And my prayer was, God, let me make it to something better before my kids grow up so that they can see there's more to life than this. During this time, the church moved a couple of times and ended up back in Jake's hometown of South Charleston, where membership grew to 300, and it was multiracial. No small feat in the South, even in the 90s. You guys, even today, I remember not this past summer, the summer before, we were in Tennessee and we were going to church on Sunday, and you could see people of color go to colored churches, people who are white go to white churches. It's almost like you step back into the 60s on Sunday. It's really odd. And here he is in 1990, so you're talking 20 years ago, and he had a multiracial church. Amazing. Jake's appeal as a speaker and a preacher gained local awareness, but it still was not paying the bills. I had nothing but creativity. I had to think of something. And that's why I say entrepreneurship is a mindset. It's a mentality. It's a thinking of something. And in order to think of something, you have to always believe that you have something inside. You have to always believe you have something inside. For Jake, that something was a message for women who were hurting. His message was controversial in a church setting. Jake saw a need to help women who had experienced trauma and abuse to find healing through their faith. He planned to address sensitive and even off-limit topics such as rape, incest, drug addiction, and physical abuse. Not your typical sermon. The first week, he taught his message as a regular Sunday school class for women. The next week, attendance doubled. Jake says he covered everything he planned to cover in 2 weeks, but when the demand for the third week was evident, I was just adding to it because clearly I was onto something. By the fourth week, women started standing outside the door trying to get in. He told the preacher at another church, I'm teaching this class and they're going crazy about it. And his friend invited him to come teach at his church and asked that Jake's call the class what he called the class. He thought about a Bible verse he was using as part of the lesson and named it on the spot, Woman, thou art lucid. So many people signed up to take the second series, they had to move it from the church into a hotel. It was amazing, he says, shaking his head. He took the lessons he taught at both churches and he put them together in a book, but nobody wanted to publish it. So can you imagine, like, this guy is broke as joke. Nobody wants to publish his book. There was no precedent for a man providing biblical answers to sociological ills addressed toward women. It was taboo. Women talked to women and men talked to men. Nobody would invest in it. Jake decided to invest in it himself. He emptied his savings and took $15,000, money he was saving for a house, and poured it into the book. All 5,000 copies sold in 2 weeks. He ordered 5,000 more. It sold out again. Then they started ordering 10,000 at a time. Today, the book has been translated into multiple languages and has sold more than 5 million copies worldwide. Jake spoke to bigger and better rooms full of women about how to survive the traumas of life. The church at that time didn't really treat women that well. It was almost misogynic in some way, Jake says, so it caught on like fire. In 1999, he was speaking to more than 80,000 women in the Georgia Dome, breaking NFL and Billy Graham's previous attendance record. All with that started at a Sunday school class. Jakes had already moved the church to Dallas and founded TDJ Enterprises, combining all of his creative and entrepreneurial and entertainment work together into a single company. One day, producer Reuben Cannon saw a production of the play Jakes created on Woman, Thou Art Lucid in Los Angeles. Afterwards, Cannon told Jakes he wanted to make the play into a movie. The first version was a TV series on a shoestring budget. Then Cannon brought in a few investors, each to fund a small portion of what turned out to be a multi-million-dollar big screen movie budget. When investors like Cedric the Entertainer and Oprah Winfrey pitched in, all signs pointed to a winner. The film went on to take top honors at the 2004 Santa Barbara Festival and several others. Released on only 408 screens, it broke into top 10 in sales during its release, the first movie of such limited release to do so since Amistad. Then Sony came calling. To this day, Jakes has the first look contract with Sony Pictures that gives the company an initial first shot at any new projects he conceives. Jakes looks at it as exhilarated when he shares his story today as he must have felt more than 10 years ago when all of this snowballed. Let me tell you something that's funny about feelings. He leans in. Feelings are, for me, I can't say this about everybody, but my feeling of euphoric excitement are always delayed. Because when you're doing it, you can feel it. Because you're somewhere in the back of your mind thinking you're screwing it up. You don't get to celebrate until you look back at it. And I think that's important to know because success doesn't feel successful. He says that just like everyone else. At the time when all of this success was coming his way, he was saying to himself, Oh my God, can I do this? Do I have what it takes? He refers to his 2014 best-selling book, Instinct, The Power to Unleash Your Inborn Drive. It is very much an instinct. It isn't always the facts. You're never going to know you can do it. You just have to believe you can do it and jump into your belief and go. Basically, it comes down to faith. Faith at work. For a man who spends much of his life leading a church that touches millions of people around the world online and thousands each week, Jakes has an interesting take on religion. I personally think that it's a shame religion surrounds God, he says, because religion often stops people from having a relationship with God. And to me, it's much more about that relationship than it is about rules and religion. It's much more about that personal vacuum in the human soul being filled with something that causes it to not ache so bad. Is that what faith is? Filling the vacuum? Yes, it is, he says. It fills the vacuum and it fills the question that facts cannot answer. The uncertainties of life, the ambiguity of what will tomorrow bring, the answer to that question is faith. That whatever it is, I'll be okay because I'm not made whole by what happens to me. I am made whole by what happens in me. And to take that power back from all the people around you who are trying to mess with your head, that helped me as an individual. Did you get that? You know, when people try to mess with your head, when you have faith, it's not about what's around you, it's about what's in you. I love that. Jake has preached on stages with translators from languages he doesn't even know. He has preached in nursing homes, homeless shelters, and to kids dying of cancers. In that time, he says faith helps people from all walks of life for one simple reason. No matter what the group is or what the audience is, we all have something in common. The rich and the poor, the white, the black, Democrats, Republicans. It doesn't matter how you describe yourself. That chasm, that void, that craving for something that makes everything make sense, faith is the only answer. Wealth is not. Education is not. Faith is, to me, the only answer to that void, and I find it very fulfilling in a personal way. But no religion certainly promises a life without suffering, which is why Jake says people struggle with their faith. Jake says this happens because our expectations are not realistic. Expectations are often made out of misrepresentation. The thought that if there was a God, you would have no trouble. Who made you think that Jesus was Santa Claus and that God is a wishing well? Somebody says, what good is God if he's not going to deliver me from suffering? Jake says his results first attitude is this results first attitude is childish. We mature to realize that we grow more in our suffering than we do in our success. We grow more in our suffering than we do in our success. Our success is just a distraction from the class of suffering where we are developed as human beings. And I hate it as much as anybody in the world, but everything I ever learned that mattered, I learned it from failure and falling and suffering. I celebrate success, but I learned it in suffering. And this is probably the part of the article that I love the most. He says that he learned an early lesson in what authenticity was. When he was 8 years old, he set out to buy his mother a Christmas present, and he chose a suede jacket for her, and he put it on layaway. Now, if you don't know what layaway is, you could put an item on hold at a store, and you leave it with a deposit, and every week you come make a payment on it until it was paid off, and then they would release it to you. So similar to having a credit card, but they would physically hold the item for you. It was called layaway. But so he put it on layaway and paid it off and brought it home. When his mom opened her present, Jakes noticed a flaw in the garment. I was disappointed, and my mother told me, look at the tag. On the tag it says, the flaws in this garment prove the authenticity of the product. I don't know why I knew at that early age of maybe 8 or 10 how important that statement was, but I never forget it. Had it been synthetic, it would have been flawless. But the reality is proven in the flaws. That's how you know it's really suede. Wow, that's true about me too. If there are no flaws, then I'm synthetic. Your realness is proven by your imperfections. I hope and pray that this article, his life, his story, his struggle, his suffering has impacted you. I know that there's no such thing as a perfect life. Everybody has suffered. I've suffered, you've suffered. And the blessing comes in the burden. whatever it is that burdens you is probably what you want to undo and make right. And that's where the blessings are, you guys. That's where the blessings are. And so you chase it down. And I loved how he shares that entrepreneurship is a mindset. How do I overcome? How do I find new leads? How do I find a new place to work? I'm an entrepreneur at mind. It's a mindset. I'm going to find a way. I'm going to figure it out. But I don't sit there defeated. I don't sit there and go, I don't know where else to go. I think about it. I'm like, okay, where can I meet people? Where can I meet the right people? And when I get there, have the courage to say something and not just stay quiet. And that's really what sets you apart as being successful or falling into failure. And you know what? I have failed. I have failed more than you have because I've been doing this longer, 14 years next week. I'm so excited, my 14-year anniversary of Mary Kay. And so I have failed miserably, and then I just learn from it and I get up. I will tell you one thing I hate is making the same mistake twice. I want to learn from it and I want to move on. So I love this statement on authenticity, that there are flaws, and that's what proves your authenticity, that you're not going to have a perfect track up. It is not going to be perfect, but if you don't continue to be creative and have this entrepreneurial mindset, you're not going to get from here to there, okay? I want to read to you, you guys, I believe the major thing that holds us back are limiting people in our lives and limiting patterns that we have set, okay? Now, this may not apply to all of you, but I do want to read this story to you. A woman saw a dying baby rattlesnake. Oh, by the way, this is from T.D. Jakes' book, Destiny. A woman saw a dying baby rattlesnake, brought it home, and nursed it to health. When the snake returned to full force and vitality, guess what the snake did? It bit the woman. Why? The dying woman asked as the venom slowly infiltrated her bloodstream. Why did you bite me when I took you in my home and I cared for you until you got well? Is this how you repay me? The rattlesnake replied calmly and dispassionately, you knew I was a rattlesnake when you took me in. People do what they do. If you are courageous enough to keep moving toward destiny, you will outgrow the need to ask why. Your why will be that you've become someone else. You've grown and expanded. Your thoughts, actions, needs, and desires now frighten timid people. So they try to trip you up as you rise. Don't get distracted by them. Don't spend time wondering, why is she doing this to me? Summon the courage within yourself to live the life that you desire. It takes courage to let go of limiting people, even when they hurt you and impede your destiny. You need courage to admit that they're like vampires and zombies. Gather up your courage and let such relationships go for destiny's sake. And I love this because you may think, oh no, I have real healthy relationships, but you may have limiting habits. For example, I don't know if you listen to the radio, but there's commercials that are feeding your brain with something. Even songs create limiting beliefs. Movies can create limiting beliefs. Any commercial, social media, there's so many things that you're bombarded with. Are you aware of that? And do you put up a conscious block to keep your head straight so that you go and chase down your dream, so that you're not deterred? And that's got to be one of my greatest strengths. You know, like I am literally a thoroughbred with those blinders on and I could just run and I'm not moved or swayed. I believe our greatest strengths are also our greatest weaknesses. And because I do this, by the time I look up, I'm like, okay, wait, how come other people aren't here with me? Because as a leader in Mary Kay, you will take others with you. So when no one's following, you got to figure out what happened. And it's because since I'm doing this and most people are not, they're still back there. So I'm like, you got to put these people up. You got to put up these blinders and come along and chase down your dream with passion. So I pray that that you have loved this this story time with your national sales director. I know that I loved hearing about I love to hear about success stories, but I loved hearing about T.D. Jakes some more. So here is your homework for this week. Number 1, fill out your weekly accomplishment sheet. Number 2, finish your power start. Thank you for those of you that sent me their tracking form. Just take a picture and send it to my Voxer Driven Ari. Okay, I'm Driven Ari on Voxer. So finish your power start. Show me the tracking towards your power start. Okay. Number three, I want you to tell me what was your biggest takeaway from TD Jake's story today. Your biggest takeaway from TD Jake's story today, okay? And number 4, how will you implement this, or what did you do to implement it in this week, okay? We come together for the last time next Wednesday at 8:30. Set your alarm. I love you. I believe in you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mwah.